The morning sun cast long shadows across New Geneva's pristine streets when the first orbital bombardment began. Maria Santos was brewing coffee in her kitchen when the sky turned white-hot, and the world she knew ended in fire. The Zeltharian fleet had arrived 3 days earlier, their massive vessels blotting out portions of the sky like metal storm clouds. They'd broadcast their ultimatum across every frequency: complete surrender of humanity's outer colonies, immediate cessation of all terraforming projects, and submission to the Galactic Covenant's protection. Earth's response had been swift and clear: no. Now, 22 million people were paying the price for that defiance. Maria's apartment building shook as another plasma lance struck downtown. Through her window, she watched the colonial administration center vaporize in a pillar of superheated gas. The blast wave shattered windows for miles, and she threw herself behind her kitchen counter as glass fragments peppered the walls where she'd been standing moments before. Her communication device crackled to life with emergency broadcasts. All civilians report to designated shelter areas immediately. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. But Maria knew the truth that the authorities couldn't bring themselves to say. There were no adequate shelters for an orbital bombardment of this magnitude. The Zeltharians weren't trying to capture New Geneva, they were erasing it. She grabbed her emergency pack and ran for the stairwell, joining the stream of panicked residents fleeing downward. The building's emergency lighting cast everything in an eerie red glow. Children cried in their parents' arms while adults tried to maintain some semblance of order in the chaos. "Where's the nearest shelter?" someone shouted. "Sub-level parking garage," replied an elderly man wearing a colonial security uniform. "Reinforced construction might give us a chance." They made it down 4 flights before another impact shook the building. The lights went out completely, and someone screamed in the darkness. Emergency illumination flickered on, revealing cracks spreading across the concrete walls like spider webs. "Keep moving," the security officer commanded. "We can't stop now." Maria helped a woman with 2 young children navigate the debris-filled stairwell. One of the kids, a girl maybe 8 years old, looked up at her with wide, frightened eyes. "Are the monsters going to hurt us?" Before Maria could answer, the building groaned ominously. Through gaps in the stairwell wall, she could see other structures collapsing throughout the city. Skyscrapers that had taken decades to construct crumbled like sandcastles under the relentless bombardment. They reached the parking garage just as another wave of ships passed overhead. The concrete ceiling above them was already cracked, chunks of debris scattered across the floor where vehicles had been crushed by falling concrete. About 200 people had gathered in the space: families, elderly couples, young professionals who'd been caught in the city when the attack began. The security officer's radio crackled with status reports from other parts of the colony. Residential District 7 is gone. Complete destruction. District 3 reporting massive casualties. Medical facilities overwhelmed. A young man with blood streaming down his face grabbed the officer's arm. "What about the evacuation ships? When are they coming for us?" The officer's expression said everything. There would be no rescue ships. The spaceport had been among the first targets hit. Even if they could have launched vessels, the Zeltharian fleet controlled orbital space completely. Maria found herself thinking about Earth, 37 light-years away. Her brother lived there with his family in the sprawling arcologies of Sao Paulo. Her parents had retired to a small farm in what had once been called Brazil. They probably didn't even know about the attack yet. News from the outer colonies took weeks to reach Earth through the quantum communication relays. Another bombardment wave passed overhead. The impacts were getting closer now, more systematic. The Zeltharians were conducting a grid-by-grid elimination of the entire colony. Through the parking garage entrance, she could see fires burning throughout the city. The sky had turned an ugly orange-brown from all the smoke, and debris kicked up into the atmosphere. "Why are they doing this?" whispered the woman with the children. "We never threatened them. We were just trying to build new life here." An older man sitting nearby overheard. "It's about resources," he said bitterly. "This system has rare earth elements they want. Easier to kill us all than negotiate mining rights." But Maria knew it was more than that. She'd studied galactic politics during her training as a colonial administrator. The Zoltharian Empire had built its power on a simple principle: overwhelming retaliation against anyone who dared resist their expansion. They'd done this before to other species. Entire civilizations had learned to submit rather than face complete annihilation. Humanity had made a different choice. The next bombardment was so close that dust rained down from the ceiling. Cracks appeared in the concrete supports, and Maria realized their shelter wouldn't last much longer. Around her, people were praying in a dozen different languages: Arabic, Spanish, Mandarin, Hindi, English. The diversity that had made New Geneva such a vibrant community was now united in terror. A little boy, maybe 5 years old, tugged on his mother's sleeve. "Mama, when will Papa come home?" His mother tried to smile through her tears. "Soon, baby. Papa will come home soon." But Papa worked in the mining complex on the continent's far side, and that facility had been bombed 6 hours ago. Maria had heard the reports before the communication networks went down. No survivors. The Zoltharian ships made another pass, and this time the bombardment seemed to last forever. Beam after beam of superheated plasma lanced down from orbit, each impact creating its own miniature mushroom cloud. The parking garage shook violently, and chunks of concrete began falling like deadly rain. "Everyone against the far wall," the security officer shouted. Away from the entrance, they huddled together in the deepest part of the garage while their world ended above them. Maria found herself holding the hand of the elderly man beside her, a complete stranger, but in that moment, family. They were all human. They were all dying together. The bombardment continued for another hour. When it finally stopped, the silence was somehow worse than the violence had been. No more explosions, no more rumbling engines overhead, just the crackle of fires and the distant sound of collapsing structures. Someone tried their communication device. Static. They tried emergency frequencies. More static. The orbital bombardment had destroyed every satellite, every relay station, every piece of infrastructure that connected New Geneva to the rest of human space. They were alone. "I'm going up to assess the situation," the security officer announced. Several volunteers joined him, including Maria. They climbed through the rubble-filled stairwell, emerging onto what had once been a busy street. New Geneva was gone. Where the city had stood that morning, only smoking ruins remained. Every building had been reduced to twisted metal and scattered concrete. Bodies lay everywhere, some recognizable as human, others burned beyond identification. The air tasted of metal and ash. In the distance, they could see the Zoltharian ships maintaining their orbital positions. Waiting, watching, making sure nothing moved down here that shouldn't. "My God," whispered one of the volunteers. "They killed everyone. The entire colony." Maria looked around at the devastation and felt something cold and hard settling in her chest. Not despair. She'd moved beyond that. This was something else. Something that felt like steel wrapped in ice. "Not everyone," she said quietly. "Some of us are still alive." The security officer nodded grimly. "Question is, what do we do now?" "We survive," Maria replied. "And we remember. Every face down here, every person they murdered. We remember them all." Over the following days, more survivors emerged from various shelters throughout the colony. In total, they numbered fewer than 3,000 out of a population that had been 22 million. The Zoltharians had been thorough in their work. They organized themselves quickly, establishing a hidden base in the deep mining tunnels that had somehow escaped the bombardment. The elderly security officer, whose name turned out to be Captain Rodriguez, took charge of their makeshift community. Maria found herself appointed as his deputy, helping coordinate their meager resources. Food was scarce, medical supplies even scarcer. They sent scavenging teams into the ruins during the night, when the Zoltharian sensors were less likely to detect movement. The teams brought back whatever they could find: canned goods from destroyed supermarkets, medical equipment from the rubble of hospitals, weapons from the collapsed Colonial Defense Center. It was during one of these scavenging runs that they made their most important discovery. Dr. Chun, a quantum physicist who'd been visiting the colony for a research project, found the remains of the communication facility's quantum transmitter. Most of it had been destroyed, but the core components were salvageable. With some creative engineering and parts scavenged from throughout the ruins, they might be able to send a message. One message, Dr. Chun explained during their evening briefing. Maybe two if we're lucky. The jury-rigged transmitter won't last long. What do we tell Earth? Asked Rodriguez. Maria looked around at the faces of their small community. Refugees in their own world, survivors of an attempted genocide. She thought about her brother, her parents, all the billions of humans living safely in the inner systems. They needed to know what had happened here. More importantly, they needed to understand what it meant. We tell them the truth, she said. We tell them that 22 million humans died here. We tell them how we died and why we died. And we tell them that if they don't respond, this is just the beginning. Dr. Chun worked for 3 weeks to build their transmitter. They had to move it twice when Zeltharian patrols came too close to their location. The aliens had landed ground forces to secure the mining facilities, but they seemed content to let any remaining humans die slowly in the ruins rather than waste resources hunting them down. That was their mistake. On the night they were finally ready to transmit, Maria stood in the makeshift communication center deep underground. Around her, the last free humans on New Geneva watched in silence as Dr. Chun made final adjustments to his cobbled-together equipment. Signal strength is good, he reported. We have maybe 10 minutes before the power cells drain completely. Maria activated the recorder and began to speak. She told Earth everything. About the ultimatum, about the bombardment, about the 22 million people who died simply because humanity had refused to submit. She spoke calmly, clearly, knowing that her words would reach Earth in approximately 3 weeks. She also knew that by the time Earth received her message, everyone in this underground chamber would probably be dead. The Zeltharians would find them eventually, or they'd run out of food, or any number of things would happen. But Earth would know. Humanity would know. This is Maria Santos, Deputy Colonial Administrator of New Geneva, she concluded. We are the last witnesses to what happened here. Do not let our deaths be meaningless. Do not let the galaxy think that humanity can be slaughtered without consequence. Remember us. Avenge us. And make sure this never happens to another human world. She ended the transmission and looked around at her companions. They all knew they just declared war on behalf of their entire species. Earth's government might choose diplomacy, might try to negotiate with the Zeltharians, might even decide to abandon the outer colonies to preserve the inner systems. But Maria suspected they wouldn't. She'd studied human history during her education, and she knew one thing about her species that the Zeltharians had apparently failed to understand. Humans never forgot their dead, and they never forgave those who murdered them. The message reached Earth exactly 23 days later, broadcast simultaneously to every government facility, every news network, every communication device on the planet. By the time it finished playing, 12 billion humans knew exactly what had happened to New Geneva. The response was not long in coming. Admiral Sarah Chun stood in the center of Earth's Unified Command Center, watching as Maria Santos' final transmission played for the 100th time on the main screen. Around her, the representatives of every nation, every alliance, every political faction that had ever existed on Earth sat in absolute silence. For perhaps the first time in human history, there was no disagreement, no debate, no political maneuvering. There was only rage. 22 million, whispered President Martinez of the American Federation. They killed 22 million of our people. Not just killed, added Chancellor Williams from the European Union. Exterminated. Like insects. Admiral Chun had seen war before. She'd commanded peacekeeping operations in the Martian independence conflicts, had overseen the suppression of pirate activities in the asteroid belt. But this was different. The footage from New Geneva, what little had been recovered by automated monitoring stations, showed something that went beyond warfare into the realm of systematic annihilation. The Chinese premier, an elderly woman named Liu who had spent decades advocating for peaceful expansion into space, spoke with a voice like ice. How long until we can mobilize the fleet? Defense Secretary Harrison from the African Coalition pulled up holographic displays showing Earth's current military assets. The home fleet can be fully operational within 6 weeks. We have 47 heavy cruisers, 15 battleships, and over 300 destroyers and frigates, plus support vessels. And the orbital platforms? 1,200 defensive satellites with antimatter warheads. Another 800 with kinetic bombardment capabilities. Admiral Chun studied the numbers. On paper, it was an impressive force. Earth's military had been built primarily for system defense and keeping peace among the colonies. They'd never planned for an interstellar war against an alien empire that could casually exterminate entire worlds. "What do we know about Zeltharian military capabilities?" asked the Indian Prime Minister. Intelligence Director Jackson activated another holographic display. Based on long-range observations and diplomatic intelligence, the Zeltharian Empire controls approximately 40 star systems. Their fleet numbers in the thousands of vessels, ranging from small patrol craft to massive dreadnoughts we estimate at over 5 kilometers in length. An uncomfortable silence fell over the chamber. Earth's entire military force would be vastly outnumbered in any direct confrontation. However, Jackson continued, they've never faced concentrated human resistance. Their expansion has relied primarily on intimidation and overwhelming force against divided or technologically inferior opponents. They've never fought an enemy with our level of industrial capacity or tactical flexibility. Admiral Chun stepped forward. With respect to this council, we need to stop thinking in terms of conventional warfare. The Zeltharians have made one critical error. They've shown us exactly what they're capable of, and they've given us time to prepare. "What are you suggesting, Admiral?" asked President Martinez. "I'm suggesting we don't fight them on their terms. We fight them on ours." Dr. Michael Harrison, the head of Earth's Advanced Weapons Research Division, had been waiting in the outer chamber for 3 hours. When he was finally called before the Unified Council, he carried with him a briefcase containing blueprints that had been theoretical exercises just weeks earlier. Now, they represented humanity's path to survival. "The Quantum Torpedo Project has been in development for 8 years," he explained, activating a 3-dimensional projection in the center of the chamber. "Until now, we focused on defensive applications, mining asteroids, clearing space debris, that sort of thing. But the underlying technology can be weaponized." The projection showed a sleek missile, barely 2 meters in length. It looked unremarkable compared to the massive fusion warheads that currently armed Earth's ships. "This single torpedo carries a quantum destabilizer warhead," Dr. Harrison continued. "When it detonates, it creates a cascade effect that destabilizes atomic bonds across a radius of approximately 50 kilometers in vacuum. Any matter caught in that radius simply ceases to exist at molecular level." The council members looked at each other with expressions ranging from hope to horror. "How many can we produce?" Admiral Chen asked. "With our current manufacturing capacity, maybe 50 in the next 6 months. But if we convert the entire industrial base to war production..." He paused, checking his calculations. 3,000 torpedoes in 1 year. 5,000 in 18 months. And delivery systems? That's the elegant part. The torpedoes are small enough to be fired from standard ship launchers or even mounted on converted civilian vessels. We don't need to build an entirely new fleet. We can upgrade what we have. Defense Secretary Harrison leaned forward. "What about the moral implications? These weapons could sterilize entire planets." Dr. Harrison's expression hardened. "The Zeltharians sterilized New Geneva. 22 million people reduced to ash and radioactive dust. I think the moral question has already been answered." Admiral Chun studied the weapon specifications. The quantum torpedoes represented a significant technological advancement over anything the Zeltharians were known to possess. "But would it be enough?" "We need more than advanced weapons," she said finally. "We need intelligence. We need allies. And we need to make sure they never see us coming." 3 weeks later, Captain Lisa Park guided her stealth reconnaissance ship through the outer edge of the Kepler 442 system. The underscore Shadows Edge underscore was one of 12 vessels that had been hastily modified with experimental cloaking technology, quantum field manipulators that bent light, and sensor radiation around the ship's hull. They were humanity's eyes and ears in alien space. Zeltharian fleet composition confirmed, reported her sensor officer. 47 capital ships in high orbit around the fourth planet. Looks like they're stripping the mining facilities. Captain Parks studied the tactical display. Kepler 442 had been another human colony world with approximately 8 million residents. Like New Geneva, it had been cleansed to make way for Zeltharian resource extraction. The aliens were strip mining the planet's surface, ripping away entire mountain ranges to reach valuable mineral deposits. Any sign of survivors? Negative, Captain. No human life signs detected anywhere on the planet. Another 8 million dead. Captain Park felt the familiar cold anger settle in her stomach. Every reconnaissance mission brought news of more atrocities, more human worlds reduced to empty graveyards. Communications. Relay our data to Earth via quantum burst transmission. Include detailed scans of their ship configurations and defensive positions. Captain. The underscore Shadows Edge underscore was the first human vessel to successfully penetrate deep into Zeltharian-controlled space. Their intelligence was invaluable for what Admiral Chun had begun calling the response, humanity's coordinated counterattack against the alien empire. But intelligence gathering was only part of Captain Park's mission. Weapons. Arm the quantum torpedo. Armed and ready, Captain. Target the largest Zeltharian vessel, the one that looks like their command ship. She waited until the underscore Shadows Edge underscore had drifted to within 50,000 kilometers of the alien fleet. Close enough for the quantum torpedo's limited guidance system to ensure a precise hit. Far enough away to escape before the aliens realized what had happened. Fire. The torpedo streaked across space, its quantum drive leaving almost no signature trail. The Zeltharian command ship, a massive vessel over 3 kilometers long, never detected the incoming weapon. Captain Park watched through her ship's sensors as the torpedo struck the alien vessel's forward section. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, space itself seemed to tear open around the impact point. The quantum destabilizer warhead functioned exactly as designed. Atomic bonds throughout the target vessel simply stopped functioning. Matter dissolved into its component particles, which then dissolved into pure energy. The enormous Zeltharian ship vanished in a flash of light that briefly outshone the system's star. The other alien vessels immediately went to high alert, sensors sweeping space frantically for the source of the attack. But the underscore Shadows Edge underscore was already gone, slipping away through hyperspace while the Zeltharians tried to understand what had just destroyed their flagship. Captain Park's mission report reached Earth 12 hours later. The quantum torpedo had performed perfectly. One shot, one kill. The most powerful weapon in the Zeltharian fleet had been eliminated without warning or possibility of defense. Admiral Chun read the report and smiled grimly. It was humanity's first strike back against the aliens who had murdered their colonies. But it was only the beginning. Across Earth's industrial centers, the conversion to full war production was proceeding at unprecedented speed. Every factory, every manufacturing facility, every research laboratory had been refocused toward a single goal, building the tools necessary to destroy the Zeltharian Empire. The lunar shipyards, which had previously constructed maybe 20 vessels per year, were now producing 10 ships per week. Mars had become one enormous weapons factory, its domed cities working around the clock to produce quantum torpedoes and the advanced guidance systems needed to deliver them across interstellar distances. The asteroid belt mining operations have been militarized, their massive industrial platforms repurposed to construct ammunition and spare parts for the growing human war machine. Even the agricultural worlds were contributing. Food production had been optimized to support military logistics rather than civilian consumption. But perhaps most importantly, humanity was learning. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the head of the Xenobiology Research Institute, had spent months analyzing every scrap of intelligence gathered about Zeltharian physiology and psychology. Her conclusions were disturbing, but tactically valuable. They're apex predators, she explained to Admiral Chun during a private briefing. Their entire species evolved as the dominant life form on their homeworld. They've never experienced existential threat, never had to adapt to being prey instead of predator. What does that mean for our strategy? It means they're psychologically unprepared for a war of extermination. They expect other species to surrender when faced with overwhelming force. The concept of fighting to the death, of accepting massive casualties to achieve victory, it's alien to them. Admiral Chin nodded thoughtfully. But they're not stupid. Once they realize we won't surrender, they'll adapt. Which is why we need to hit them hard and fast before they have time to develop countermeasures, Dr. Vasquez agreed. We need to make them afraid. Fear is something they understand, even if they've never experienced it personally. The strategy that emerged from these discussions was unlike anything in human military history. Earth wouldn't attempt to match the Zeltharian ship for ship or fight conventional battles across multiple star systems. Instead, they would strike like a plague, appearing without warning to eliminate key targets before vanishing back into the vastness of space. 12 reconnaissance vessels like the _Shadows Edge _ had been constructed, each equipped with the most advanced stealth technology human science could produce. Their mission was to map every Zeltharian facility, identify every weakness, and deliver quantum torpedoes to high-value targets. Meanwhile, the main human fleet would remain hidden in carefully prepared positions throughout the outer systems, ready to respond when the Zeltharians finally located Earth's forces. 6 months after New Geneva's destruction, Admiral Chun stood on the bridge of the newly commissioned UES_Retribution_, humanity's first true battleship designed specifically for interstellar warfare. Around her, the combined Earth fleet, over 400 vessels ranging from small destroyers to massive dreadnoughts, prepared for their first major operation. They were going to hit the Zeltharians where it would hurt most. Intelligence confirms the target, Admiral, reported Captain Morrison from the _Retribution's _intelligence section. Zelthara Prime. Their homeworld. Population approximately 2 billion. Admiral Chun studied the tactical displays showing the alien homeworld's defenses. Orbital platforms, defensive satellites, patrol fleets. All the standard protections for a species that had never faced serious external threat. How many quantum torpedoes do we have? 800 aboard the fleet, Admiral. Another 200 with the stealth vessels already in position. It was enough to glass the entire planet, to reduce Zelthara Prime to a radioactive wasteland, just like they'd done to New Geneva and dozens of other human worlds. Admiral, said Captain Morrison carefully, there are civilian populations down there. Families. Children who had nothing to do with the attacks on our colonies. Admiral Chun turned to look at her through the bridge's viewports. In the distance, she could see the other ships of the human fleet, their hulls gleaming with fresh armor and bristling with weapons that hadn't existed a year ago. Captain Morrison, how many human children died on New Geneva? Approximately 4 million, Admiral. And on Kepler 442, 1.2 million. Admiral Chin nodded slowly. She'd memorized the casualty reports from every human world the Zeltharians had destroyed. 47 colonies. Nearly 200 million human beings reduced to ash and memory. Signal the fleet, Captain. All ships prepare for quantum torpedo deployment. Target every major population center, every military facility, every industrial complex on Zelthara Prime. She paused, thinking of Maria Santos and the 3,000 survivors who had died slowly in the ruins of New Geneva. Thinking of all the humans who would never see their families again, never laugh or cry or dream or hope. And Captain, send a message to the Zeltharian government before we begin the bombardment. I want them to understand exactly why this is happening. The message was simple and direct. This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the United Earth Fleet. You killed 22 million humans on New Geneva. You destroyed 47 of our worlds. You committed genocide against our species. Today, we return the favor. This is humanity's declaration of war. The first quantum torpedo struck Zelthera Prime's capital city exactly 1 hour later. The Zeltharian High Command bunker was buried 3 kilometers beneath their homeworld surface, designed to survive anything short of a direct hit from a stellar-class weapon. Admiral Vorthka had never imagined he would need such protection for what the Zeltharians had dismissively called the human insects. Now, as his homeworld burned above him, he was learning the difference between confidence and arrogance. "Report," he commanded, his 4 arms working furiously at the command interfaces while his subordinates scrambled to make sense of the catastrophe unfolding on their screens. 17 major population centers have been destroyed, reported his intelligence officer, her voice trembling with something Zeltharians rarely experienced: fear. The weapons appear to be some form of matter disintegrator. Complete molecular dissolution across a 50-kilometer radius per detonation. Admiral Vorthka's primary eyes focused on the tactical display, while his secondary pair monitored casualty reports. In the space of 3 hours, the humans had killed nearly 400 million Zeltharians. The attacks were precise, surgical, targeting the most densely populated areas with ruthless efficiency. "What about our orbital defenses?" "Gone, Admiral." The human fleet appeared without warning. "Our sensor networks detected nothing until their first volley struck our satellite platforms." "Impossible." Zeltharian sensor technology was the most advanced in the galaxy. Their early warning systems covered 3 full light years around their homeworld. Nothing should have been able to approach undetected. "How many human vessels?" "Initial counts suggests over 400 ships of various classifications." "Admiral, this isn't a raiding force. This is their entire military fleet." Admiral Vorthka felt his respiratory chambers constrict. The intelligence reports had suggested the humans possessed perhaps 50 combat-capable vessels. Clearly, those reports had been catastrophically wrong. A new alarm sounded through the bunker. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet. It's being broadcast on all frequencies." "Display it." The main screen shifted to show a human female in a dark military uniform. Behind her, Admiral Vorthka could see what appeared to be the bridge of a massive warship. The human's face was composed, almost serene, but her eyes held something that made the Zeltharians' combat instincts scream warnings. "I am Admiral Sarah Chun of the United Earth Fleet," the human said. "By the authority granted to me by the Unified Earth Council, I hereby inform you that a state of total war now exists between humanity and the Zeltharian Empire." She paused, and Admiral Vorthka noticed that she was holding what appeared to be a data tablet. "The crimes committed against human colonies constitute genocide under the laws of civilized species. The systematic extermination of civilian populations. The deliberate targeting of non-combatants. The complete destruction of infrastructure necessary for survival." The human woman's voice remained calm, professional, but something in her tone made Admiral Vorthka's skin crawl. "Therefore, the Unified Earth Council has authorized what we call reciprocal response. For every human world you have destroyed, we will destroy 1 of yours. For every human life you have taken, we will take 10 of yours. For every act of genocide you have committed, we will respond with complete extermination." The transmission continued for another few minutes, but Admiral Vorthka was no longer listening. His mind was racing through tactical calculations, strategic implications, political ramifications. The humans weren't demanding surrender. They weren't seeking territory or resources or political concessions. They wanted to kill every living Zeltharian in the galaxy. "Admiral, incoming priority transmission from the 3rd Fleet," announced his communications officer. "Admiral Keth Na is requesting immediate reinforcement. The humans have attacked the Draxus system." "Draxus?" Admiral Vorthka's tertiary eyes swiveled to check the star charts. "But that's 8 light years from here. How could they attack 2 systems simultaneously?" His intelligence officer looked up from her displays with an expression of growing horror. "Admiral, I'm receiving reports of attacks on Zeltharian installations in 6 different star systems, all within the past 4 hours." The tactical implications hit Admiral Vorthka like a physical blow. The humans hadn't committed their entire fleet to attacking the homeworld. They'd split their forces into multiple strike groups, hitting targets across Zeltharian space simultaneously. While he'd been focused on defending against the attack on Zelthar Prime, the humans have been systematically destroying military installations, industrial centers, and civilian populations throughout the Empire. "Give me a fleet-wide communication to all Zeltharian forces," he ordered. "Emergency protocols, maximum encryption." When the connection was established, Admiral Vorthka found himself facing the holographic images of 12 other fleet commanders scattered across the Empire. The reports they delivered painted a picture of coordinated devastation that defied everything the Zeltharians understood about warfare. "They hit us at Vegas 7 with 40 ships," reported Admiral Hesti from the Third Fleet. "Precision strikes on our orbital shipyards, then they vanished before we could respond. Estimated losses, 30,000 workers, plus our entire heavy construction capability." "Similar attack at the Proxima mining complex," added Admiral Zarnko. "They destroyed our entire extraction operation with those molecular disintegrator weapons. 200,000 workers killed, plus irreplaceable industrial equipment." The pattern was becoming clear. The humans weren't trying to capture territory or defeat the Zeltharian military in conventional battles. They were systematically destroying the Empire's ability to function, killing the workers, destroying the factories, eliminating the infrastructure that kept billions of Zeltharians alive. "What about our response capabilities?" Admiral Vorthka asked. "Can we track their fleet movements? Predict their next targets?" Admiral Genare, from the border regions, shook her head. "Their ships vanish completely between attacks. No hyperspace signatures, no energy missions. Our best sensors show empty space where their vessels should be. It's like they phase out of reality itself." Admiral Vorthka studied the tactical displays showing the growing scope of human attacks. In less than 12 hours, they'd struck at over 20 Zeltharian installations, killing millions and crippling key industrial centers. The Empire's military was scattered across dozens of star systems, unable to concentrate forces because they couldn't predict where the humans would strike next. "We need to consolidate our fleets," he decided. "Pull back all forces to defend our core worlds. Leave the outer territories if necessary." "Admiral," interrupted his intelligence officer. "Incoming transmission from the Emperor's Council." The holographic display shifted to show the ornate chamber where the Zeltharian Empire's ruling council conducted their deliberations. Emperor Vashna himself appeared in the center, his ceremonial armor gleaming despite the crisis unfolding around him. "Admiral Vorthka, explain to me how a primitive species with fewer than 50 starships has managed to attack our homeworld." Admiral Vorthka felt his respiratory chambers seize up. The Emperor clearly hadn't been briefed on the true scope of the human military capabilities. "Your Imperial Majesty, our intelligence estimates were incorrect. The humans possess a fleet of over 400 vessels equipped with advanced stealth technology and weapons we don't fully understand. Impossible." Our xenobiology experts confirmed that humans lack the cognitive capacity for advanced warfare. They're a young species, barely capable of interplanetary travel. "Nevertheless, Your Imperial Majesty, they've killed over 600 million of our citizens in the past day. They've destroyed critical industrial centers across 12 star systems, and their attacks are continuing." The Emperor's expression shifted from disbelief to rage. "Then crush them. Deploy the entire Imperial fleet. Turn their homeworld into molten slag." "Your Imperial Majesty, we don't know where their homeworld is located. Our intelligence on their territory is severely limited. Find it. Use whatever resources necessary. I want these insects exterminated completely." The transmission ended, leaving Admiral Vorthka alone with his impossible orders. Find and destroy a human homeworld that could be anywhere among thousands of star systems. Defeat a fleet that could appear and disappear at will. Stop an enemy that seemed to understand Zeltharian capabilities better than the Zeltharians understood human ones. 3 days later, Admiral Vorthka received the intelligence breakthrough he'd been desperately seeking. a captured human communication device, recovered from the wreckage of a destroyed colony, had been successfully decoded by Zeltharian cryptographers. The data contained navigation charts, supply routes, and, most importantly, the coordinates of several human worlds, including what appeared to be their primary industrial centers. Sol system, he read from the decoded files. 12 billion inhabitants. Primary manufacturing centers on the third planet, called Earth. Secondary installations on the fourth planet, Mars, and throughout the asteroid belt. His tactical staff clustered around the holographic display showing the human territory. It was smaller than expected, only about 30 star systems compared to the Zeltharians' 43. But the population density was staggering. Humans had packed billions of people into relatively few worlds, creating massive industrial centers that could explain their impressive military production. It's a fortress system, observed his intelligence officer. Look at these defense satellite networks. Thousands of platforms protecting the inner planets. Admiral Vorthka studied the data more carefully. The humans had apparently invested heavily in static defenses around their core worlds. Orbital weapon platforms, particle beam networks, gravity mines, all the standard tools for system defense. But static defenses could be overwhelmed by sufficient force. How many ships can we deploy? The entire Imperial fleet numbers 2,300 vessels, Admiral. We could bring 800 to bear against the human homeworld while maintaining defensive positions elsewhere. 2,000 ships against their 400. Even with their advanced weapons and stealth technology, the humans couldn't survive those odds in a direct confrontation. Prepare the fleet for immediate departure, Admiral Vorthka ordered. We'll hit their homeworld with everything we have. If they want a war of extermination, we'll show them what that actually means. The Zeltharian armada that departed for Sol System 3 weeks later was the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. 2,300 warships, ranging from small frigates to massive dreadnoughts over 6 kilometers long. Their combined firepower could sterilize entire planets, reduce continents to molten glass, boil away oceans. Admiral Vorthka commanded from the bridge of the Imperial Vengeance a super dreadnought that served as the flagship for the largest military operation in Zeltharian history. Around him, his staff monitored the progress of the armada as it traveled through hyperspace toward the coordinates they'd extracted from the human communication device. Estimated arrival in Sol System, 14 hours, reported his navigation officer. And our intelligence on human defensive capabilities? Based on sensor scans from our previous encounters, they appear to rely primarily on particle beam weapons and kinetic projectiles. Their quantum torpedo weapons are devastating, but they seem to have limited numbers available. Admiral Vorthka nodded. The humans had caught the Empire off guard with their stealth technology and advanced weapons, but they were still a young species with limited industrial capacity. Once the Zeltharian fleet eliminated their homeworld, the scattered human colonies would be easy targets for systematic extermination. Admiral, interrupted his sensor officer, I'm detecting something unusual on our long-range scanners. What kind of unusual? Hyperspace disturbance. Large ones, consistent with major fleet movements. Admiral Vorthka studied the sensor displays with growing unease. The distortions were massive, suggesting hundreds of ships moving through hyperspace. But they weren't emanating from Sol System. They were coming from behind the Zeltharian fleet. How many ships? Difficult to determine precisely, Admiral. At least 300, possibly more. Admiral Vorthka felt his combat instincts screaming warnings. The humans had somehow detected the Zeltharian fleet movement and deployed their own forces to intercept. But how could they have known about the attack? And how had they managed to position their fleet behind the Zeltharian armada? Change course. Evasive maneuvers. I want us out of their intercept vector immediately. But it was already too late. The hyperspace distortions were converging on their position from multiple directions. The humans hadn't just deployed one fleet. They'd split their forces into several groups, surrounding the Zeltharian armada like hunters closing a trap. Admiral, multiple fleet groups dropping out of hyperspace. They're everywhere. Admiral Vorthka watched in horror as his tactical displays lit up with hundreds of human vessels appearing throughout the area. They'd been ambushed, surrounded by an enemy that had somehow predicted their movements and prepared accordingly. And then the quantum torpedoes began to fly. The first volley eliminated 16 Zeltharian dreadnoughts before Admiral Vorthka could even order return fire. The molecular disintegrator warheads tore through Zeltharian armor like it was paper, reducing massive warships to expanding clouds of particles. Return fire. All weapons. But the human ships were already gone, vanishing back into hyperspace before the Zeltharian weapons could lock onto them. Seconds later, they reappeared in different positions, launching another devastating volley before disappearing again. It was a massacre. The Zeltharian fleet, designed for conventional warfare against static targets, was helpless against an enemy that could appear and disappear at will. Ship after ship vanished in brilliant flashes of molecular dissolution while the humans danced through hyperspace like ghosts. Admiral Vorthka realized with growing despair that the intelligence data had been a trap. The humans had allowed them to capture the communication device. The coordinates, the defensive information, everything had been deliberately fed to the Zeltharians to lure their entire fleet into this carefully prepared ambush. All ships, retreat, he commanded. Emergency hyperspace, jump. Get us out of here. Less than half of the Zeltharian armada escaped that day. Over 1,200 ships were destroyed, along with their crews and the Empire's most experienced military officers. The greatest fleet in galactic history had been reduced to scattered survivors fleeing through hyperspace while the humans methodically hunted down the stragglers. Admiral Vorthka's flagship limped back towards Zeltharian space with critical damage to its hyperspace drives and over 60% casualties among the crew. As he sat in his command chair, staring at the tactical displays showing the destruction of his fleet, he began to understand the true scope of what the Empire faced. The humans weren't just more advanced than intelligence had suggested. They were completely beyond anything the Zeltharians could comprehend. Their technology, their tactics, their strategic thinking, all of it operated on a level that the Empire had never encountered before. But more terrifying than their capabilities was their clear intention. The humans weren't trying to win territory or achieve political objectives. They were systematically working to exterminate every Zeltharian in the galaxy. And based on what Admiral Vorthka had just witnessed, they might actually succeed. Commander Jake Morrison crouched in the ruins of what had once been Zelthar Prime's largest university, his tactical suit's sensors sweeping for signs of life among the twisted metal and collapsed structures. 6 months had passed since Admiral Chen's fleet had turned the Zeltharian homeworld into a graveyard of ash and radioactive glass, but intelligence suggested that some of the alien leadership had survived in deep underground bunkers. Today, humanity was going hunting. Movement detected 2 kilometers southeast, whispered Sergeant Lisa Park through the comm system. Looks like a small group moving through the old government district. Morrison checked his weapon systems. The plasma rifle was fully charged, and his armor carried enough ammunition to fight for hours if necessary. Around him, the other members of Reaper Squad prepared for another systematic sweep of the devastated cityscape. They weren't looking for military targets. The Zeltharian fleet had been effectively destroyed, their orbital defenses reduced to floating debris. What remained of their empire was scattered across a dozen isolated star systems, cut off from each other and slowly dying as human strike forces eliminated their supply lines and industrial centers. No, Morrison and his team were hunting something more important: information. Remember the mission parameters, he told his squad over the tactical network. We need prisoners. Live ones. Intelligence wants to know about their remaining colonies, their defensive positions, anything that might help us finish this war faster. Corporal Chen's voice crackled through the comm system. Sir, with respect, after what they did to our colonies, why are we taking prisoners? Why not just glass every world they've ever touched and be done with it? Morrison understood the sentiment. Every human soldier in the field had lost someone to the Zeltharians' genocidal campaign. His own sister had been living on New Geneva when the bombardment began. Her 2 children, his nephew and niece, had died with 22 million other humans while the aliens watched from orbit. But Admiral Chin's strategic planners had convinced Earth's leadership that complete extermination required complete knowledge. Hidden Zeltharian colonies, sleeper agents among other alien species, possible biological weapons designed to target humans. All potential threats that needed to be identified and eliminated before humanity could truly claim victory. "We do this right, Corporal," Morrison replied. "Clean, professional, thorough. The dead can wait for justice until we make sure there's no one left to threaten the living." They moved through the ruined city in formation, their enhanced senses scanning for any trace of Zeltharian survivors. Most of the planet's surface had been sterilized by the quantum torpedo bombardment, but intelligence suggested that the aliens had built extensive underground facilities designed to survive orbital attacks. Morrison's suit sensors detected unusual energy signatures emanating from a collapsed government building about 300 meters ahead. The readings were consistent with Zeltharian life support systems running on emergency power. "Found something," he reported to his team. "Looks like an underground facility. Energy signatures suggest maybe 50 to 60 individuals." Sergeant Park moved to cover the main entrance while the rest of the squad positioned themselves around what appeared to be emergency exits. Morrison activated his suit's penetrating radar and began mapping the underground complex. 3 levels down, he reported. Main gathering area on the lowest level. Looks like they've got some kind of command center set up. The breach was textbook perfect. Shaped charges blew open the reinforced entrance while stun grenades disabled any defenders. Morrison's squad flowed into the underground complex like water, their weapons ready but not firing. They wanted prisoners, not corpses. The facility turned out to be a government emergency shelter, designed to house key Zeltharian officials during crises. Morrison found himself face-to-face with what appeared to be the planet's former planetary governor and his staff. 37 aliens huddled in a command center that still bore the scorch marks from desperate attempts to contact their destroyed fleet. Governor Hathry looked up at Morrison with all 4 eyes, his breathing apparatus working overtime in what Morrison recognized as a Zeltharian fear response. The alien leader was elderly by their species standards, his natural armor plate scarred and dulled with age. "Human soldiers," the governor said in heavily accented standard. "I suppose you've come to complete the extermination." Morrison kept his weapon lowered but ready. "That depends on how cooperative you're feeling, Governor. We have some questions about your Empire's remaining assets. I will tell you nothing that would help you murder more of my people." Morrison studied the alien official for a moment, then activated his suit's holographic projector. Images filled the air between them. Surveillance footage from New Geneva, Kepler 442, and the 45 other human colonies the Zeltharians had destroyed. 22 million humans died on New Geneva alone, Morrison said quietly. Children, families, people who'd never fired a shot at anyone. Your forces didn't just kill them, they turned them into radioactive ash while they were still screaming. Governor Hathry's secondary eyes focused on the holographic displays. Those were legitimate military targets. Colonial resistance centers. Hospitals were military targets. Schools. Residential districts with no defensive capabilities. The governor's breathing apparatus wheezed faster. Resistance to the Empire's expansion constitutes an act of war by the entire population. Morrison felt a familiar cold anger settling in his chest. Even after losing their homeworld, even facing complete extermination, the aliens still couldn't acknowledge what they'd done. They still believed that humanity deserved to be wiped out for refusing to surrender their colonies. Sergeant Park, he said calmly, set up the interrogation equipment. Standard procedures. The standard procedures that had been developed for Zeltharian prisoners were psychological rather than physical. Humans had learned that the aliens' apex predator psychology made them vulnerable to certain forms of mental pressure that would have minimal effect on other species. They started by showing Governor Hathry detailed footage of the destruction of Zeltharian military installations throughout the Empire. Ship after ship vanishing in quantum torpedo strikes. Orbital platforms dissolving into component atoms. Massive dreadnoughts that had taken decades to construct being reduced to expanding clouds of particles. Your third fleet, Morrison explained as the images played. 47 vessels. We eliminated them in 17 minutes without losing a single human ship. The governor's tertiary eyes swiveled to focus on the tactical displays. Impossible. The third fleet was commanded by Admiral Kethna. He's one of our most experienced, was commanded, Morrison corrected. Admiral Kethna is dead. His flagship was the first target we hit. Molecular disintegration warhead, direct impact on the bridge. He had maybe 2 seconds to realize what was happening before his atoms stopped holding together. They moved through the list systematically. Every Zeltharian fleet, every major installation, every colonial government. Morrison's team had access to real-time intelligence from human forces operating throughout alien space. They could show the governor exactly what was happening to his empire, hour by hour, as humanity methodically eliminated everything the Zeltharians had built over centuries of expansion. The Vegas 7 shipyards, Sergeant Park announced, updating their displays. Destroyed 6 hours ago. Human strike force eliminated the orbital construction platforms and approximately 40,000 workers. Governor Hathrie's breathing became more labored. You're lying. The Vega yards are too heavily defended. Our sensor networks would have detected any approaching fleet. Morrison activated another holographic display, this one showing real-time footage from the attack. Human stealth ships appeared like ghosts among the Zeltharian construction platforms, their quantum torpedoes turning massive industrial complexes into expanding balls of energy. Your sensor networks detected nothing because our ships exist in a quantum uncertainty state between attacks, Morrison explained. We call it phase cloaking. The ship is simultaneously present and not present until we choose to resolve the quantum state by firing weapons. It was more than the aliens could handle psychologically. Governor Hathrie was a member of a species that had never faced existential threat, never experienced being prey instead of predator. Watching his entire civilization being systematically dismantled by an enemy he couldn't even detect was breaking something fundamental in his mind. What do you want from me? He whispered finally. Information, Morrison replied. Hidden colonies, sleeper agents, biological weapons, emergency protocols, anything that might represent a future threat to human worlds. The interrogation lasted 18 hours. By the end, Morrison had detailed intelligence on 12 hidden Zeltharian colonies scattered throughout remote star systems, 3 separate biological warfare programs, and a network of alien agents operating on 17 different worlds. Governor Hathrie had broken completely, sobbing as he provided the access codes that would allow human forces to penetrate the deepest levels of Zeltharian military databases. Sir, Corporal Chun said privately as they prepared to leave the facility, what about the prisoners? Do we transport them back for further questioning? Morrison looked at the 37 Zeltharian survivors huddled in their underground shelter. They provided everything useful they could. Further interrogation would yield diminishing returns. He thought about his sister, Maria, about her 2 children who'd been vaporized along with 22 million other humans, about the 47 human colonies that had been reduced to ash and memory. Negative, Corporal. The mission was intelligence gathering, not prisoner transport. He activated his suit's external speakers and addressed the Zeltharian survivors. By the authority of a unified Earth Council, you have been found guilty of genocide against humanity. The sentence is death. The plasma charges Morrison's team placed throughout the facility were precisely calculated. The underground complex would collapse completely, ensuring that no traces remained of either the aliens or the intelligence they provided. Morrison's squad was back on the surface within 15 minutes. Behind them, the earth shook as the charges detonated, sealing the shelter and everyone inside it beneath tons of rubble. Control, this is Reaper Squad, Morrison reported through his quantum communicator. Mission accomplished. Package delivered. Intelligence gathered. Returning to extraction point. Similar operations were taking place across dozens of worlds throughout former Zeltharian territory. Human Special Forces teams, equipped with the most advanced technology Earth could provide, were conducting systematic hunts for alien survivors. Not for prisoners or intelligence, though those were useful byproducts. They were hunting because humanity had decided that the Zeltharian species represented an existential threat that could only be eliminated through complete extermination. Admiral Chun read Morrison's mission report from the bridge of the UES_Retribution_ as her fleet prepared for the next phase of operations. The intelligence gathered from Zeltharian survivors was proving invaluable for identifying hidden colonies and potential threats. But, more importantly, the psychological impact on alien leadership was becoming apparent in their increasingly desperate communications. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Zeltharian Emergency Government," reported her communications officer. "They're requesting parley." Admiral Chen almost smiled. The aliens were finally beginning to understand their situation. "Display it." The holographic projection showed a Zeltharian female wearing what appeared to be emergency military clothing. Behind her, Admiral Chun could see what looked like a hastily constructed command center, probably aboard one of their few remaining ships. "I'm Admiral Yarika, acting commander of the Zeltharian Emergency Council. I wish to discuss terms for ending this conflict." Admiral Chun studied the alien commander for a moment. She looked tired, desperate, probably hadn't slept in weeks. The weight of watching her entire civilization collapse was evident in her posture and movements. "Yem listening, Admiral Yaraka. We propose immediate cessation of hostilities. Complete Zeltharian withdrawal from all disputed territories. Reparations for damages to human colonies. Establishment of neutral zones between our species." Admiral Chun was quiet for several seconds, letting the silence stretch until she could see the alien commander shifting nervously. "Admiral Yarika, I think there's been a misunderstanding about the nature of this conflict." "What do you mean?" "This isn't a territorial dispute. This isn't a political conflict. This isn't even a war in any traditional sense." Admiral Chen's voice remained calm, professional. "This is pest control." The alien commander's 4 eyes widened. "Pest control? Your species committed genocide against mine. You systematically exterminated 200 million human beings across 47 worlds. You did this because you viewed us as inferior, as obstacles to your expansion." Admiral Chen paused, checking her tactical displays. "We decided you were right about one thing. This is about species survival. But you misidentified which species would survive. But we're offering complete surrender. Withdrawal from human space. Reparations." "Admiral Yarika, let me be absolutely clear about our objectives. We are not seeking your surrender. We are not interested in reparations. We are not trying to capture territory or achieve political goals." Admiral Chun leaned forward slightly, and her expression became something that would have triggered every predator recognition instinct the Zeltharian possessed if they'd encountered it in the wild. "We are exterminating your species completely. Every male, every female, every egg, every hatchling, every world you've ever touched, every ship you've ever built, every trace that the Zeltharian Empire ever existed. We will hunt you through every star system in the galaxy until the last of your kind dies alone in the dark." The transmission ended, leaving Admiral Chun alone with her thoughts and the tactical displays showing the positions of human fleets throughout the galaxy. Phase 1 had been revenge, destroying their homeworld and primary military assets. Phase 2 had been disruption, eliminating their industrial capacity and supply lines. Phase 3 had been intelligence, gathering information about hidden assets and potential future threats. Phase 4 would be completion, the systematic elimination of every Zeltharian in the known galaxy. Admiral Chen activated the fleet-wide communication system. "All ships, this is Admiral Chun. Begin Phase 4 operations. Rules of engagement. No prisoners, no survivors, no exceptions. Any ship, station, or planetary installation containing Zeltharian life signs is to be destroyed immediately." She paused, thinking about Maria Santos and the 3,000 survivors who had died slowly in the ruins of New Geneva. "Remember why we're here. Remember what they took from us. And make sure that when this is over, No human will ever have to fear the Zeltharians again. The largest genocide in galactic history began with a simple acknowledgement from 400 ship captains. Understood, Admiral. Beginning extermination operations.